Hey there, my name is Bernadette Smith. Welcome to 5 Things in 15 Minutes, my weekly show where I bring good vibes to DEI. That is good vibes to diversity, equity, and inclusion with a little dash of corporate social responsibility. What I've found is that there are lots of news stories about what's going wrong in the world and lots of negative data, but there are also a lot of things going right. That's what I like to focus on. I search for DEI stories that we can be inspired by and learn from. My hope is to inspire you to experiment with some of these inclusive actions and policies within your own organization to help you build a more inclusive world. In this week's episode, I'm joined by Kelvin Goss, SHRM national speaker, founder of DEI in Action, inventor of You Played the Race Card, an inclusion and belonging game. This week, our conversation is about achieving gender parity in M.B.A. programs, the NFL's Inclusive Fan Gear Initiative, and more. Kelvin, will you please introduce yourself, my friend? It is great to have you on the show.
Well, thank you, Bernadette. I'm honored to be on your show. I look at your pedigree and just continually in admiration. I love that you are so focused around making a difference in other people's lives and just the doors you've opened and conversations you spark with your creativity and innovative mindset. So I'm excited to be here. And I think you pretty much shared an opening statement around me. I don't want to spend our time around that, but I do love this work. And, I can tell you from an early age, I learned quickly that if you surround yourself with successful people, treat them with respect and dignity, great things happen. And I just try to use that philosophy, whether it was in operations or whether it was in HR or whether it was when I decided to become, a practitioner and expert in diversity, equity, inclusion. If you use that word, and I use it lightly, I hear people say that, Bernadette, but when I think about all there is to know, we're constantly learning. So daily, we add to our repertoire of what we have and build upon that and continue to try to enhance that expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because it is such a cross functional discipline, DEI, it's impossible to be an expert in all of it,
Yeah,
right?
agreed. 100% agree. Love daily learning more of how we can take someone else's best practices and enhance what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, your current role is a chief diversity officer for a company. So can you tell me what in that work is giving you hope and giving you, momentum to keep this going, especially when there's been some backlash lately?
Yeah, there's been a lot of backlash. I think the spark from higher education when it comes to that. And I look at titles as you work hard to obtain a certain title, but I think it reminds me, and I don't know if you remember, there was a saying that the quality goes in before the name goes on. Well, there was a catchphrase with a popular area of sales. I say the same thing around this work. Title, I think, shows up in your work. And so for me, when I think in terms of how that higher education impact that was mentioned around affirmative action had a ripple effect across
Hmm.
organizations, because if they just read the headline news and didn't dig into it deep,
Yeah,
it could cause them to, knee jerk left or knee jerk right
right.
without really understanding what is it that's being said, how does it impact higher education, and then how does it impact the workplace as well. So from that perspective, I think it put noise in the system, but you can filter through it if you take the time to do the research and still continue to move the work forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you really do look at the details, I mean, there's not necessarily a big impact that companies should be doing, right? I mean, there's not too much that they should be or could be doing differently to avoid being, I guess, in perceived in violation of.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah. So I think it's really important to stay the course. What are some of the things that you do in your life to sort of stay the course?
Yeah, so I think from the perspective of how do you stay a course or create a roadmap around inclusivity that is unshakable and can
Hmm.
weather most any storm that comes at it, is when you truly look for ways to take biases out of any part of that roadmap, whether that be anybody alluding to, hey, we need to pick up X, Y, and Z percent of people, et cetera. I think you should look at it. You want the best talent, but are you really
Hmm.
casting your net wide and deep enough that you get diverse candidates that truly want to be part of your organization. And for me, Bernadette, you can tell a story all day long that you're doing those things, but it'll show up. You can feel it in an environment in just a few minutes when you walk in the doors of an organization. So I think from that perspective, when you're thinking about building something that's concrete, that's sustainable, you want to see how do you create an environment that's inclusive for everyone, and they have an opportunity. I love this. People ask, what's the difference between equity and equality? And I love this answer that this young man gave. I asked this when I was doing a presentation, and typically people will give all type of analogies, etc. And it was real simple. He said, "Well, equality would mean everybody gets a pair of brown shoes. Equity means that you get shoes that fit your feet that are brown." And I
Yep.
was like, that's amazing. A great simple illustration to bring home the point. Let's create that type of environment. And then when we can move forward with that, I think that's when you see it'll yield great results. To be even more specific, if people are sporting fans, Bernadette, when you watch them on Sunday, if you're a football fan, basketball fan, baseball fan, when you see those people in the stands, you see all nationalities, all ethnicities, all races, all age groups. There's 5 generations in the workplace. All of them have on the same gear, yelling and screaming for one united win. Can you imagine if you could create that same environment in the workplace?
Mm. Oh, wow. That is a very simple but complicated thought. Like the reality of that is hard, but the
Yeah,
premise is so simple.
it really is. And it's
Yeah.
amazing. They would do anything for that team to win. And that's where you get the business case for creating an inclusive environment.
Yeah. Interesting. I love that. I love that analogy. Thanks, Kelvin.
Yeah.
Well, just to quickly talk about equity versus equality, I get that question a lot because my company's name is Equality Institute, right? And so my quick answer is, well, equality is sort of this aspirational place.
Mm,
It is far off, right? But one of the ways we get there is through equity by
yes.
giving folks a fair shot, keeping in mind their individual circumstances. So that's sort of how I frame it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love the name of your institute, Equality Institute. Who wouldn't want to be part of that with just by hearing the name? So you just picked a great name to embrace. People will just gravitate to, because I think that's what the world is missing. And I think it's not always malicious. I think it's
Hmm.
from educational awareness. So I love that that's what you focus on.
Yeah, thank you. Well, in this week's 5 things, I wrote about ouch moments. I was on a call with an organization that was looking to bring us in, and they have a premium high touch service with account managers that were having they were embarrassing themselves in front of their clients because of mistaken assumptions. And in our work, we call these ouch moments. And and I think that it's really important to sort of know that the antidote to assumptions is asking better questions, right? So we have a tool we use here called ARC method: ask, respect, connect.
I love it.
But I think that it's important to remember that we all do this. We are all going to make those ouch moments, even folks who are from historically marginalized groups, because we can't know everything about everyone, and so we're all going to be making those mistakes, and I think it's just really important to be honest about that.
Yeah, I love that. And I like that you've put them in a category of calling them ouch moments, because they come with a sting.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, if a person is oblivious and they continue to sting, at some point, it could be pretty detrimental to that, that body part, because you can only get so many stings before it's at another level.
Yeah.
And so I think that, to your point, how do you put yourself in a position to let someone know that you just shared an ouch moment with me privately, so that they can work on that, and if they choose to not, then that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, let's get into this week's good vibes, Kelvin. The first story this week comes from MBA programs. So, what the new data has told us is that business schools at Penn State and Oxford University have reached gender parity in their MBA programs, joining George Washington University, Johns Hopkins, and the University of Pennsylvania. So, what we're seeing is more women in business leadership pipelines, and when women are only at 10% of running Fortune 500 companies, this is a pretty big deal that to see that the pipeline in MBA programs is that balanced.
Yeah, I love that you picked that topic because as I think through Fortune 500s, and I'm proud to say that there's a couple of CEOs that I know that are on that list. But then I watch that list, Bernadette, and it fluctuates so much from year to year.
Mm-hmm.
Like they maybe achieved the title, but then it seems like, hey, you see when you look at retention, for years in that role, it's a little different. I
Yeah.
like that, to your point, that this is a path that they're looking at because two, I think analytics will show that typically females' grade point averages are a little higher as well. So why wouldn't we want to pursue creating a more inclusive environment to adapt to this type mentality if they see work? And I think everything kind of starts with a hypothesis, but if they're on to something special, I think it'd be something that could be adapted and cross-pollinated across all institutions of that nature.
Absolutely. And I think that there are a few other things that I are really cool about this story to me. I mean, one is that this is not something that just happened overnight, right? This is something that's clearly been worked on for 10, 15, 20 years to sort of keep building up that pipeline, keep improving access, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just a reminder that it is a long game and it works eventually, right? And so goodness, we need some patience, but I think that it's progress, and here on Five Things we celebrate progress in all forms.
I love it. I love it. It almost reminds me of the movie Hidden Figures. And when I think in terms of how, there were individuals who brought this certain special attribute to the organization, but they just weren't in a position to showcase it.
Yep.
So I think this kind of helps build a platform where it is to your name of your institute, Equality Institute. I think it kind of ties back to if people continue to be curious and seek those opportunities, it'll create a better workforce, a better world.
Yep, absolutely. All right, the second story this week comes from the American Ornithological Society, which is revamping bird names that honor individuals. So, what has happened is that there are a lot of birds named after people, and some of those people have been very racist or otherwise exclusive or former slave owners of enslaved people, et cetera, et cetera. So, they've made a new blanket policy to rebrand species after the birds themselves, after the characteristics of the birds, and not just historical figures. So, you know what? Bit by bit, Kelvin, the patriarchy is being dismantled.
Absolutely, Bernadette. When I saw this one, I was like, yeah, that's news to me because I hadn't spent a lot of time even checking that out. But when you do get a glimpse, and I think again it goes back to being curious. Someone was curious enough to ask the right questions to put
Mm-hmm.
this on someone's radar screen. And I think to me, that's the perfect example of saying, don't walk by something and just say accept it because it's the norm. Be curious, challenge the status quo in a respectful way, and good things can come from it, like what you see with this article.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? It's not just something that was done in 2020. Here we are 3 years later, and these types of changes are still happening slowly but surely. So, again, celebrating progress. All
Yeah,
right.
love it. Love
Third
it.
story this week comes from the National Football League, which is leveling up on inclusivity by launching a line of adaptive and assisted apparel for all 32 teams. 26% of adults have some form of disability. These are folks who will now have access to tees and hoodies with magnetic snaps, wider neck openings, back buttons, etc., for folks with disabilities and sensory issues.
Yeah, man, all of this to me is again, it relates back to constantly looking for how do you improve the norm
Hmm.
instead of a one size fits all mentality, whether that's, your business approach, your roadmap for diversity, equity, inclusion. Don't just look for a one size fits all. Look and see what fits the DNA of your
Hmm.
clients and your audience and build from there. And this is a perfect example. I have a really good friend who is a chief human resource officer for the Arizona Cardinals, and just had him speak recently to our team. And it was amazing, just some of the things that they're trying to put in place. And I don't know if for fans of NFL, even just looking across the stadium or looking in the back of the helmets, you can see constant change, constant improvement, trying to send a message. We want to do better. Are they perfect? No, but they're working towards how do they improve. And to me, that's a progressive organization who's thinking, how do we, holistically change? Because with the platform the NFL has, that's pretty big. So when you see
Mm-hmm.
them making those type changes, typically people will follow audiences that they feel like, hey, are pretty credible. And I think the NFL has a large captive audience, and if they can see improvement there, it definitely can be mimicked or copied back at other organizations.
Absolutely. We had someone from the Seattle Seahawks on here a few weeks ago, and she was Karen Wilkins Mickey, and she was talking about what they've been doing. And you're right. I mean, if they can set that precedent, it really goes. It's a great model for the sort of the mass market.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I love that they took it to a whole nother level by being curious, like what can we do? What's missing, and what can we do to improve it?
Exactly. All right. The fourth story this week is also about accessibility. Sony is launching the Access controller for PlayStation in a month. And it's a circular controller that's been in development for 5 years. It features customizable buttons, a control stick that can be adjusted for comfort. Users can configure settings to meet the needs and use it alone with other controllers. So it's really designed for folks with disabilities to have it be a lot more flexible in how they can game. You know what? I think I love to celebrate opportunities for everyone to experience joy. And my son certainly finds joy in gaming. And I love that this is one way that expands that access.
Yeah, I love it too. And it even becomes closer to home when you have individuals who may have disabilities.
Hmm.
And I know you mentioned that I created the race card game. I created an entire deck centered around disability because it's just such a great opportunity to see how others who maybe had disabilities overcame that as an opportunity in their work and used it as an advantage. And it was
Yes.
amazing to see how when you peel back those layers, some people who are labeled as disabled have other special abilities, and how do you tap into that? And so I'm glad to see Sony once again pioneering something that can change the game across all their industry, but
Yeah.
continue to recognize that humans at the end of the day is called humankind, and when we can be kind to humans, good things happen.
Yes. Well, that is a great quote.
Mm.
Great quote. Okay, the fifth story, the last story this week is from the U.S. Navy. Admiral Lisa Franchetti was confirmed as the first female chief of naval operations, breaking a historic glass ceiling in U.S. military leadership. And really, the first woman on the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I believe. And I mean, what a big deal this is, especially because naval appointments have been blocked. So, this is a big deal.
This is huge. And so again, once again, I think it's kind of like when people saw, can people run a 4 minute mile? Well, oh my gosh, they can. Then that just opened the doors for just people to start just blowing that record out of the water. So playing off of that same mindset, what other doors will this open for someone who sees, people are visual. I think it said like 85% of what we learn, Bernadette, in life comes through what we see.
Yeah.
And when we can see individuals who achieve this type, goal, or if that was from the time this person joined the Navy, was that a goal? That only inspires other people to say, I can do it too. I can do it too. And I think when we have more of those stories we can share, is where that's kind of the sweet spot, because that does inspire others to say, let me question that. Let me ask more, deeper questions, or ask it a different way. And if the answer doesn't sound quite right, then you can go back to the drawing board and see where you could create an environment where you have more success stories like this.
Absolutely. Well, she will be the first, but not the last.
I 100% agree.
And we celebrate that on Five Things as well. Kelvin, it has been great having you this week. Can you tell folks how they can get in touch with you?
Sure, you can connect with me on LinkedIn at Kelvin Goss. You can also reach out to me on my website at youplayedtheracecard.com. I would love to talk to you and see how we can continue to improve that game, as it's doing some really incredible things at some organizations that have leveraged it. And really, it comes from the heart. My mom taught school for about 40 years, and I love education. And I think no matter what part of the work we're in, if we're in HR, if you're an operator, everyone plays in the space of inclusion, equity, and diversity. And there's a business case when you get it right to move it forward.
We'll make sure we put that in the show notes. Your game is really fun. It's really clever. I think it's really well done. And I think it's something that everyone can and should just kind of have, things that we don't even think about. So we'll make sure we put that in the show notes. And folks, please stay in touch with Kelvin. You're a wise and kind man. So I'm really grateful to call you a friend.
I'm honored to have you as a friend too, Bernadette. It means a lot, and it's a sincere friend who's there through the good and the bad. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely, you can always count on me. I mean that.
I know.
This week's call to action. It's Native American Heritage Month, so it's an opportunity for you all to explore the ancestral histories of the land in which you live. So here in Chicago, I know that I live on the traditional homelands of multiple tribal nations, including the Potawatomi. And you can look up the indigenous heritage of your area in the link in the show notes. So please check that out. Do a little bit of reflection on the land in which you live. All right, there we go. If you don't already get the 5 Things newsletter, you can subscribe at 5thingsdei.com. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great week.
Have a good day, Bernadette. Keep up the great work.